Hello, everybody. Are you ready for the show? And put your hands together and welcome to the stage, me, Janine Harouni. Hello. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Oh, man. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I know a lot of comedians start their show by thanking the audience for being there, but I genuinely mean it. Thank God you're here. Because one time, I did a one-man show to one man. I was at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I was in a super tiny venue, and I was preset on the stage, so I could see that no audience was coming in. And I thought, all right, well, we won't do the show today. And then right before it came time to make that decision, one man walked through the door holding 2 beers. I think he really understood the mood of the piece. And he walked in and he sat down directly in front of me in the first row. And then the lights started to go down, signaling the beginning of an hour-long show that I had to do to one man. And right before it went to total blackout, he just leaned forward and whispered, "Don't worry, it's only me." So this is already way better than that. So thank you all so much for being here. And thank you for letting me be here in this country, because I am from the States originally, but I moved over here to go to drama school because I wanted to study to become a serious stage actor. But after 2 years of training, my life took a very unexpected turn, and I'm now actually a full-time stay-at-home actress. But I am really glad that I moved over here because I love living over here. I love the people. I love the accents over here because I'm American, so no matter what you guys say to me, if it's in an English accent, I can't help but find it just completely charming. It could be anything. One time, I was dressed up on a night out, and this friend of a friend just went, "Oh my God, Janine, that is literally the cutest outfit I've ever seen." And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much." And she was like, "It's not fair. I wish my boobs were small enough to wear tops like that." And I just thought, oh man, if you were American, I'd punch you in the mouth. I'm very glad you guys laughed at that accent. It cost me 9,000 pounds in drama school fees. It's only ever come in handy 2 times in my whole life. The first time was when I bumped into this guy who I'd been on a really awkward Tinder date with a few months before. I bumped into him in the street one day randomly, and he was like, "Janine?" And I was like, "It's actually Sophie," and ran away. The other reason that I like living over here is because I am from a very strange part of the world called Staten Island, New York. Give me a cheer if you've been to Staten Island before. Oh, a few people. Give me a cheer if you've taken the ferry. Yes. Oh, right, okay. If you don't know, there's actually a ferry that goes from Manhattan to Staten Island, and it is completely free. And actually, did you know the reason that that ferry is free? It's because if it wasn't, no one would go to Staten Island. In fact, a lot of people, what they like to do when they get off the ferry on Staten Island is immediately get back on the ferry away from Staten Island. Is that what you did? Yeah. It's fine, it's totally fine, because Staten Island, it's, like I said, it's a weird place. It's a very Italian-American place, so everyone there just sounds like, "Anthony, I swear to God, if you..." Like, everybody's always mad at Anthony. And that sentence could end any way. That sentence could be like, "Anthony, I swear to God, if you come in here with that face, I'm gonna kiss it." My parents sound just like that, so whenever I Skype home, it's like watching a boring episode of The Sopranos. Like, I called home last week, my mom answered, in the middle of an argument with my father. She was just like, "Will you stop that now? Oh my God, look what your father is doing." And she turned the laptop around, and my dad just went, "What? I'm measuring the dog." And he was just measuring our Jack Russell Terrier. That was thankfully not a euphemism. I was like, "What's up, Dad? Why are you measuring the dog?" And he went, "This idiot dog is gonna kill himself." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's not an answer to that question." And he said, "Every time I'm in the backyard, I turn around for 2 seconds, this idiot dog jumps in the pool. He knows he can't swim, he just sinks to the bottom like a stone. Staring up at me, blinking.
So I'm making him a life jacket.
I was just like, Jesus, Dad, why do you think the dog is trying to kill himself? And he just went, honestly,
I think he knows he's a prisoner here.
In case you're wondering, my dad genuinely made that life jacket. What was it made out of?
Just 2 big empty bottles of bleach tied together with my mother's tights.
If I was that dog, I too would seek the sweet release of death. I call home a lot, and I like talking to my parents, but my dad doesn't understand the meaning of the phrase long story short, because he'll tell me a long story, which is less a story and more a collection of freely associated meanderings. And at the end of it, he'll just say, long story short, and then say something completely insane. He'll be like, I'm in the car the other day, I'm driving. I get to the gas station, it's closed. I mean, I had full tank of gas, I wasn't stopping, I just noticed, so I'm driving. And I'm listening to, do you know those iPods? Your brother got me one of those for Christmas. He never showed me how to use it. I'm listening to the radio, it's good. Anyway, long story short, I don't have my work laptop with me. Got stolen by a deer. I'm like, I feel like you left out a few details there, Dad. But I'm not sure who's worse, my dad or my mom, because my mother believes, brace yourselves, that her and I are connected telepathically, get ready, through our vaginas. That's a real thing that happens in my life. Because anytime that me or my mom see someone or sense someone in pain, we feel it viscerally in our wombs. So my mom will see somebody fall down and she'll be like, oh God, my Lolo. I should also explain, my mom doesn't like the word vagina, so my whole life growing up, she called it a Lulu, which was very confusing for me when I met my cousin Lulu, who coincidentally is a I guess I've been thinking a lot about my parents recently because they retired this year and they're selling our house. So I went home on this trip to clear out my childhood bedroom and to go to my dad's retirement party. And just to paint you a picture of my parents, my mom is 5'4" and slender, and my dad is 6'4" and a big guy. And even though my dad's the bigger one, my mom is by far the scarier one of the two, because she is super tough, she doesn't take shit from anybody, but she's smart, she's cunning, she knows how to get what she wants, and my dad calls that feminine guile. And he says I lack that. My dad once used the term bitch as a descriptor for me. It wasn't even in a mean way. He was just trying to jog someone's memory. He was like, my daughter, you know, short, brunette, a bitch. And the guy was like, Janine, yeah, gotcha. But my dad is right, because I can be very confrontational. While I was home on this trip, I took a dress to the dry cleaner because it had a stain on it. And when I went to collect it, not only had he not removed the stain, he'd shrunken the dress, somehow making the stain bigger. And we had this huge argument. I refused to pay. I stormed out of there. I said, you don't know how to do your job, buddy. But the fight must have been so bad because when I got home, I saw that the dry cleaner left me a voicemail. And on it, he said that if he ever saw me again, he would end my life. And I thought, I'm gonna get murdered by a dry cleaner. And then I thought, well, if he did kill me, at least he'd be convicted. He's got no idea how to clean up the evidence. But my mom isn't like that. She's not confrontational in that way. My mom knows how to get what she wants with feminine guile. Like, my dad definitely wears the pants in the family, but only the ones my mom leaves out for him. For example, my whole life growing up, my dad insisted that all the walls in our house be kept white. He wanted the house bright and open and airy. And after 25 years, my mom was sick of white walls, so she just waited till my dad took a nap one day and then just painted one wall yellow. And when my dad woke up, he was furious. And my mom said, it's just an accent wall, Joe. It's a pop of color. Let's leave it for a little while and see if we like it. But that week, my mom invited the neighborhood to dinner, and anytime the bell rang, she'd be like, don't worry, Joe, I'll get the door. Sit down, relax. Compliment the wall. And all week, people kept going, wow, the wall looks amazing. That wall looks gorgeous. And finally, my dad just started saying, it's called an accent wall. It's just a pop of color.
And from that day on, my mom has painted every wall in our entire house. So I've been thinking a lot about my parents because while I was home on this trip, I made a pact with myself. I said, I'm not gonna fight with my mom and dad. Because even though I love my parents, we are very, very different people. First off, I'm not particularly religious, and my parents are super Catholic. I mean, they are so Catholic, their actual names are Mary and Joseph. That's the level. And the big religious argument that we keep having recently is about my boyfriend, Andrew, because we live together, but we're not married. And when my mom heard that, she said, I don't like the idea of you and Andrew having sex outside of marriage. I just had to explain to her, Mom, we're in a committed long-term relationship. We're not having sex anymore. Because it's tough when you're in a long-term relationship to keep that spark alive, you know? In the beginning, it's easy. In the beginning, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. One time, Andrew was like, let's go. And I was like, oh no, I'm actually on my period. You'd probably just think it was gross. And he looked at me and said, Janine, I love you. I'd have sex with you if you had blood coming out of your ears. And I just thought, you are no longer my emergency contact. No. No, because I don't need Andrew turning up to the scene of an accident. And they're like, we're so sorry, sir, there's nothing we could do. And he's like, I can think of something. Recently, though, me and Andrew, we have started talking about getting married. And when my mom heard that, she said, you have to be married in a church. And I said, we don't want to do that, Ma. And she said, neither one of your brothers married Catholics, but Andrew's Irish. He's Catholic. You have to get married in a church. And I said, Andrew's an atheist. And she said, it doesn't matter. He's baptized Catholic. You have to be married by a priest. And I said, Andrew doesn't want to do that, Ma. He was touched up by one as a kid, which is awful because I just made it up. I don't know. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it worked. He's Irish. It fits a narrative. I told Andrew, we don't have to get married in a church. You do have to pretend you've been molested by a priest. The other reason it's tough for me to go home is because I'm very liberal and my parents are super conservative. When I was 12 years old, my dad wrote a letter to the editor of our local paper, and in it he said that he thought that gay people should have the right to civil union, but that marriage is a term that can only be used to describe the union of a man and a woman. And they published it. And what my dad failed to realize was that not everybody in our local town would agree with his beliefs, and our address was real easy to find on the internet, because for months afterwards, my father was unwittingly subscribed to dozens and dozens of gay porn magazines. And you have never seen a man more uncomfortable than my 6'4" father on the phone like, my name is Joe Harouni and I need to cancel my subscription to Long Schlong magazine. It was actually a genius plan because my father became so obsessed with finding the culprit that he kept all the porn in a box he unironically labeled hard evidence. And one time in high school, me and my friend, we found the box, and my friend was like, what's with all this gay porn? And I had to be like, ugh, it's my dad's. I asked my dad if I was remembering that right. I was like, is that what happened? Is that everything that happened? And my dad said, oh no, it was much worse. They booked me on gay cruises. They bought us tickets to Cats the Musical. Which is crazy because for my 13th birthday, we genuinely went to Cats the Musical. But Staten Island in general is a very Catholic, very conservative place. So a lot of my friends growing up found it difficult to come out to their parents. When my friend Sarah Giordano and I were 16, we went away on vacation together. And on that trip, Sarah told me that she was gay, but that she was too scared to tell her mom. Except that night at dinner, her mom must have sensed something because she brought the subject up. She said, I think that a man can be gay, but a woman is only gay if a man has done something to hurt her and it's turned her off men. And I could see how upset Sarah was. And I just looked at Mrs. Giordano and said, with all due respect, go fuck yourself. And I stormed out. And Sarah told me that her mom turned to her and just went, well, Janine's gay. Mm-hmm. No. She was a strange woman, Mrs. Giordano. She was giving us all these life tips on that trip. One of the things she said to us was, make sure your bra and underwear always match, because you never know who's gonna see you undressed. Which at the time seemed like strange advice, but 15 years later, it actually still seems like strange advice. Not all my friends found it difficult to come out, though, because when my best friend Josh Ferry was 5 years old, his mom and dad took him to see The Wizard of Oz on Broadway. And in the middle of the play, he just stood up and screamed to the front of the stage, "You leave Dorothy alone, you wicked old witch." And his mom was like, "Oh, he's gay. Okay. Now we know." I told Josh's mom that story was in the show, and she just went, "Please, Josh was so gay, we had to come out to him." I love that. I love the idea that Josh's mom and dad had to sit him down and be like, "Josh, your father and I have something we need to confess. We're not just roommates." And Josh was like, "I see you, and I support you." I met Josh at university. We both did the theater program at our school. We met during one of those awkward icebreaker exercises on our open day. We had to go around and all say our name and our favorite fruit. So I said, "Hi, my name's Janine. My favorite fruit's a lemon." And someone said a pear, a peach, and I got to Josh and he stood up and said, "My name is Josh Ferry and my favorite fruit is Josh Ferry." And straight away, I knew I wanted to be friends with him, which is why I was so excited when they posted the cast list for the Rocky Horror Show, because I was gonna be playing the Columbia to his Frankenfurter. I was so excited. My parents came down to see the show and were very confused by the themes. And after the show, I was driving back with my mom and dad, and it sparked this huge argument between me and my father. And I remember screaming and shouting at him, and eventually I just said, "All right, Dad, so you're telling me that if me, your daughter, who you love, if I told you that I was gay, you wouldn't come to my wedding?" And he paused and he said, "I would come to the wedding, but I wouldn't walk you down the aisle." And from the back of the car, my mom just went, "You'd walk your gay daughter down the aisle or you'd die alone." But probably the toughest thing about going home for me is that 80% of my neighborhood voted for Donald Trump. My dad voted for Donald Trump. And when I found out about it, I was really shocked because when Trump was announced as the nominee, my dad said, "You know what, I might not vote at all in this election." But the morning after he won, my dad called me up and he said, "Before you say anything, I want to let you know, I voted for Donald Trump and I support him." And I said, "Dad, voting for Donald Trump puts you in the same category as people who are racist and homophobic and Islamophobic." And I hung up the phone and I didn't talk to my dad for weeks. And then one day I was on the phone with my mom and my dad took the phone and he said, "I want to tell you a little story. I was in Mass the other day, and at the end of church, these two people came up to the podium and they made a speech asking for money. Long story short, I adopted a kid from Pakistan." That's a true story. In order to win an argument, my father has adopted a son. And he was like, "I don't know much about him. They don't give you a lot of info, but his name's Muhammad, so who's Islamophobic now?" I say my dad adopted this kid, really, he sponsors him. But it is more than just sending money across, because every month they write each other these really beautiful, thoughtful, handwritten letters. And I felt bad insinuating that my dad was racist because my dad is the son of Middle Eastern immigrants. And so our families faced our own share of racism. I was 13 when 9/11 happened. And because I don't look particularly Middle Eastern, I just blended in with all the Italian kids and became a fly on the wall to this insidious kind of racism that happens when people think they're just talking among their own kind. The summer after 9/11, I was working as a lifeguard, and one of the guys I work with said, "I don't care what country they're from or what their religion is. If they're an Arab, they're a terror suspect. We should just round them all up and stick them in detainment camps like we did with the Japanese." And I said, "Oh, okay. So you mean me and my brothers and my dad? You think we should be in detainment camps? Because we're Arab." You have to understand, I'm white passing. So in that moment, using the race card felt fucking amazing. Woo. I was just like, "Oh, you're racist against Middle Eastern people? Well, la 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 la, surprise, motherfucker." But it's tough for me to reconcile my dad's political beliefs with how I feel about him personally because my parents are my heroes. You know, we never had much money growing up, but they always donate to charity. They work every Thanksgiving at a soup kitchen, giving out hot meals to the homeless. My dad's a high school teacher, and one day he came into class, and Tang, the Chinese exchange student, didn't look well. He was struggling to stay awake, his hair was messed up. After class, my dad said, "Tang, are you okay? You don't look yourself, you all right?" Tang told him he'd been living in a bedsit with a guy he met on the internet. The guy was annoyed because Tang had a cough, so he kicked him out. Tang didn't know where to go, so he just rode the subway up and down New York all night. And when my dad heard that, he said, "Get your things, you're living with us." And he just adopted this kid, which is amazing. But he forgot one small detail, which was just to tell anyone in the family he'd done that. Because I came home from university a week later, and there was a 17-year-old Chinese boy standing in my kitchen, and my parents were away on a cruise, which I now imagine was a gay cruise. And I said, "Hello, who are you?" And Tang said, "Your brother." Tang was amazing. He'd come to the States as a teenager, barely spoke English, to study piano. He was an amazing piano player, and he loved American music, but he was starting from the beginning, so when he got to the States, he was like, "Rock and roll, Elvis Presley, let's do this." And he had slick back hair and a leather jacket, and he wore high-waisted trousers, and my mother had no idea how to communicate with him. Our first ever family dinner, my mom said, "Tang, why don't you tell us all a little bit about yourself? Have you got brothers and sisters?" And I said, "Mom, he's from China." And my mom said, "What, being from China means you can't have brothers and sisters?" That's how my mom learned about China's one-child policy. She's not a very culturally aware woman, my mom. One time I took her on a trip to Italy. Neither one of us speaks Italian. And while we were on that trip, I said, "Mom, we're in Europe. People are cultured here. Don't embarrass me." She said, "I'm not gonna do nothing." But when we got off the train in Naples, my phone had died. I didn't have the address of where we were going, but I remembered the name of the hotel. So I found a cab driver and I said, "Hi, sir, we need to go to Hotel Cirque." And he was like, "Hmm?" And I said, "Hotel Cirque?" And he was like, "Hmm?" And my mom burst in between us and went, "We go to Hotel di Cerca." And the guy went, "Ah, Hotel di Cerca. Okay, let's go. Come on." And I was remembering all this as I was back home on this trip, clearing out my childhood bedroom, because I was surrounded by all these boxes of my past. And I found all these old photographs and old books. I found this book of Aesop's fables that my dad used to use to read me to sleep every night. And I found my old high school uniform. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, which it's not as sexy as it sounds. It's much sexier. High school is where I met my friend Karen Kennedy. And Karen stood out from all the other Italian girls because she had bright red hair. And everything you need to know about Karen can be summed up by one story. She once raised her hand in class and said, "I think the reason that we don't know a lot about Hitler is because nobody knew his last name." And as I was clearing all these things, I started to remember that I used to be a really different person. In high school, I was very Catholic, I was very conservative. I was actually a member of the Young Republicans Club. And one year, me and Karen and a bunch of girls from our school, we went away on an anti-abortion march in Washington, D.C. But in our defense, the main reason that we went is because we got to share a hotel with the all-boys school. Ironically, a lot of us learned the value of legalized abortion that very night. But then I went to university in Baltimore. I left Staten Island. I met people from all different walks of life, and my views changed. When I came home, it was really tough because my dad's views hadn't changed, and we were arguing all the time. And in the States, there's lots of stuff to argue about. It was gun control, abortion, gay rights in particular. And I don't know, does anyone here have anyone in their family that they can't talk politics with anymore? Yeah, I don't know how it goes in your house, but in my house it goes, my dad makes a point, I make a point. My dad makes a point, I make a point. My dad makes a point, and I say, "History will shit on you, old man, you'll see." It's that normal family stuff. And at one point, the arguing got so bad that I started to think I hate my dad. And then a month after my 21st birthday, all the arguing stopped. Because a month after I turned 21, I was hit by a car. and it was a bad one. I paralyzed my leg for 2.5 years. I had to have 7 different surgeries, and I had to relearn how to walk again. And I only mention that in this show because I really want a good review in The Guardian. So brave. Okay. No, I mentioned it in this show because it changed the way that I saw my dad. And I think that it changed the way that my dad saw me. So it was Karen's 21st birthday, and we went to a fireman's bar. Did I love firemen at the time? Yes, I did. Do I still love firemen? Yes, I do. Did I buy my boyfriend Andrew an FDNY t-shirt I forced him to wear? 100% I did. Yes, I did. Did I deliberately shrink in the wash? Be a little bit too tight? You be the judge, but the verdict is yes. Anyway, we went to this fireman's bar. There were no firemen there. We stayed a little bit too late, and at 2 in the morning, our friend Taylor came to collect us. She hadn't been drinking. She was a sober driver. We're on the highway on the way home. Taylor got a flat tire, so she pulled over into the shoulder. Karen was on the phone with her boyfriend describing where we were, and I said, don't worry about it. I stuck my hand out the window. I said, someone will see there's just 3 girls in the car, and they'll pull over and help us. And as soon as I finished that sentence, I heard the loudest noise I've ever heard. A woman coming home late from work, fell asleep at the wheel, veered into the shoulder, and rear-ended us at 70 miles an hour. And at first, I didn't know what happened. I was really confused because when we were driving, I was in the back seat. But when I came to, I was sitting next to Karen, who was in the front passenger seat. And Karen started shouting, Taylor's been hit! Taylor was outside of the car looking at her tire, and she was hit by the force of her car being hit. And she flew 30 feet down the highway, but miraculously landed in grass and was okay. But she was curled up in the fetal position in shock. Karen saw that, and she said, Janine, get out of the car. And I said, I don't know why, but I can't move my legs. Karen didn't hear me. Her door was jammed. She was trying to open it, so she unrolled her window, put her hand on my shoulder, and pressed down to push herself out. And when she did that, I felt the most pain that I've ever felt. And I was alone in the car, and I started to piece together what happened. Just my side of the car had been hit, and I was crushed forward and pinned inside. And I started to think, okay, I'm gonna die. And when I thought that, I was surprised because I always imagined if I'd be in a situation like that I'd suddenly regret things. I'd think like, oh, I wish I'd told that boy how I felt about him, or I wish I'd become a performer. But I just had one really calm thought in my head. I just kept thinking, dying is just falling asleep and not waking up. And when I thought that, all I wanted was for my dad to be there to read me to sleep like he did when I was a kid. And I looked down on my lap, and the phone that Karen was using had landed there in the accident. So I picked it up and I called home. And it was one of those weird things where my mom answered straight away. The phone didn't even ring. It was 2 in the morning. She was dead asleep. She heard nothing. She just opened her eyes and put the phone to her ear. And she is convinced to this day it was her Lulu that woke her up. And I said, Mom, I'm so sorry to wake you up, but I've been in a car accident and I think I'm gonna die. And my mom said, is this a joke? And I said, no, Mom, what kind of fucking, no. What? I said, just come here now. So my mom dropped the phone, she grabbed my dad and ran to the car. And I was alone in the car again. And that's when I saw 2 police officers arrive. It was an older cop, he looked like he was a week away from retirement, and a younger cop who looked like it was his first week on the job. And I thought, I will not die in an episode of Law and Order. The older cop was down by Taylor and Karen and the woman who hit us. They were all screaming at each other. He was trying to calm them down. And the younger cop was peering into the crash to see if anybody was inside. So I called out, Officer, can you come here? I don't want to be alone. And he saw me and walked away. And I'm not upset by that at all because he looked so young and inexperienced, and I looked terrible. I was just absolutely covered in blood. It's a good thing Andrew wasn't there. He would have just been jizzing all over the place. And then the firemen came, and then I came. They were so sexy. Woo! They knew exactly what they were doing. This really handsome fireman knelt down next to me and he said, ma'am, you're pinned inside the car, but we have the jaws of life here. We're gonna cut you out. And all I could think was the things a woman has to do to meet some firemen. They cut the car off of me, they put me on this stretcher and they pulled me out. And that's when I saw Karen. Remember, it's Karen's 21st birthday. She's the drunkest she's ever been. She is just barefoot in a miniskirt running around. Cops and paramedics are all chasing after her. And I just thought, this isn't Law and Order, it's Benny Hill. And then my mom and dad arrived. My mom jumped out of the car and she started running towards the crash. And this cop said, "Ma'am, we need you to stay back." And my mom said, "My daughter is in that accident." And he said, "I understand, but we need you to stay clear." And my mom sidestepped the cop and started running towards the crash. The cop was chasing after her. And at this point, Karen is surrounded. It's all these cops, paramedics, firefighters. They're all trying to wrangle her into an ambulance, but she's just like jumping around, dodging the cops like, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Hi, Mrs. Harouni." And my mom was like, "Karen Kennedy, get in that ambulance." And Karen was like, "Yes, Mrs. Harouni." And she got in the ambulance. And the cop that was trying to stop my mom saw the whole thing and just went, "All right, this lady's cool. She can stay." They took us to this ER, which was a tiny, tiny room in the hospital. It was maybe just a little bit bigger than the stage. And it was just the 3 girls who'd been in the accident. And I knew that not because I could see them, but because I could hear their voices. I couldn't see anything. I was tied down on a stretcher with a neck brace on. So all I could see was the ceiling above me. And then all these heads started popping into my view. It was doctors and surgeons and nurses, and they were all talking to each other, and nobody was talking to me. And then this one very friendly face popped in front of mine, and he said, "Hello, my name is Dr. Schultz. What we're doing now is we're just cutting your clothes off to examine the injuries." And I swear to you, all I could think was, thank God my bra and underwear match. And he said, "What we're doing next is we're inserting a finger in your rectum to test for internal bleeding." And I heard Karen go, "I did not consent to that." She was being so uncooperative. They wanted her to pee in a cup, and she refused. She was like, "I don't have to pee, you have to pee. I don't have to pee, you have to pee." And they were like, "Please, just a little bit, just up until this line so we can run some tests." She maintained that she didn't have to go. And 2 seconds later, when she did go, there weren't enough buckets in the hospital to contain it all. It was just an assembly line of nurses just passing buckets of piss. And there was Karen standing up, free peeing, like, "It's actually my birthday." So... They took me away and they ran all these tests and did these x-rays, and they brought me back into the room. And this doctor said, "All right, Janine, you've suffered multiple fractures in your pelvis and both your legs, and you've severed nerves and tendons in your hand. But the worst injury is that you've dislocated your hip and it's crushing your sciatic nerve, which is paralyzing your leg. So the first thing we need to do is pop your hip back into place." And it was a real count of 3 type deal. He was like, 1, 2, and then my dad walked in. And he was just in floods of tears. And it's so hard to see a big man cry. And I said, "I need you to be strong, Dad. I need somebody strong right now." And he said, "Okay, I'll send in your mother." And then my mom walked in like she was walking into a park. First of all, she was eating an ice cream. Yep. She was making small talk with the nurses. She was like, "You're standing long hours. Are you wearing soft-soled shoes? You gotta get soft-soled shoes." I was like, "Mom, can you focus?" And she's like, "What? I can't have a conversation with somebody?" They popped my hip back into place, and my leg was still paralyzed. And they kept saying this thing to us. They kept saying, "Nerves take a long time to heal. It's difficult to know with nerve damage if the leg is permanently dead or if the muscles have just atrophied so much that they're too weak to move." So they said, "We're gonna give you 2 years. If by 2 years your leg hasn't come back, then it's time to accept it'll be permanently paralyzed." I spent 2 months recovering in the hospital, and every morning my dad would wake up, he'd go to early morning mass, he'd pray for me. Him and my mom would work full-time jobs, they'd drive an hour into the city, and they'd care for me full-time in the hospital all night. I remember one night I woke up and my dad was drawing little crosses on my leg in holy water. And I remember thinking, I don't believe in what you're doing, but I'm glad that you're doing it. I was on all this pain medication at the time. A lot of that stuff makes you hallucinate. And I told my dad, we need to lower the dosage because last night I hallucinated that I had a full-blown conversation with a young John Travolta. And my dad said, "No, that was Tang. He's discovered disco." Tang was going to university not too far away from where I was in the hospital at the Manus School of Music, which is one of the best music universities in the country. Just for context, Tang turned down Juilliard to go there. That's how much of a badass he was. And he told me at the hospital that that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the kindness of my dad. After I left the hospital, I went back home. It was another 2 years recovering there. Full time, my parents had to do everything. They had to feed me and bathe me and carry me. And it was really taxing on them. But a big relief from all that was Josh Ferry. Because remember, Josh is very sassy, so he never let me get away with feeling sorry for myself. The first time he ever came to visit me in the hospital, he closed the door and just went, "You're milking it." I had one of those haircuts at the time. I don't know if you remember, I'd shaved just that one bit of my head, but the rest of it was long. And Josh saw me like that in the hospital and was like, I would do something about the hair because in this environment, it doesn't say trendy. It says recovering from brain surgery. There wasn't a lot that I could do when I left the hospital, but I could go to the movies. So every week without fail, Josh Ferry picked me up and he took me to the cinema. The first time he came, he pulled up, he started walking up my path. I was sitting at the top of my steps in my wheelchair. My dad was next to me. And so my dad leaned down to pick me up. And I remember my dad's a big guy, but Josh is a big guy too. And Josh just reached his arm out, put it on my dad's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I got her." And he leaned down and he picked me up and he carried me to the car. And I think that's when my dad's views started to change. Because my dad saw Josh not as a gay person, but as a friend who was there for his daughter when she needed him the most. And I think that my dad's views would have really been tempered if he'd heard that as Josh put me in the car, he just went, "Jesus Christ, they can't slip some diet pills in your pain meds." God. The 2-year appointment with the nerve doctor came and I sat in his office next to my dad and he said, "I'm sorry to say, Janine, but your leg hasn't responded to any of the treatments. It's time to accept it's permanently paralyzed." And my dad said, "With all due respect, Doc, go fuck yourself." And we stormed out. I think it's a family phrase. My dad was so upset. He was wheeling me down the hallway and he was like, "You're gonna walk again, baby. And you're gonna be an actor if you wanna be an actor. And you're gonna be in movies." It was weird. He turned into like a sleazy 1940s agent. He was like, "You're gonna be in pictures, kid." But my dad was right because 6 months later, against the odds, my legs started to wake up. And as soon as I could walk again, I wanted to get out and travel. I wanted to explore the world and experience Europe. So I moved to Croydon, which has actually been more harrowing than the accident. I did the show in Dublin, and when I got to that part, I thought, oh no, nobody's gonna laugh. But people did, and I thought, oh right, Croydon's internationally shit. Okay. And like I said, I love living over here, but it has been a little bit of a tough transition for me, just culturally, because Americans were very friendly, we're very chatty. Do we have any Americans in tonight? Oh my God, a few. You there. What's your name?
Sasha.
Sasha, and where are you from in the States?
Just outside of Boston.
All right, okay, and where you're from in Boston, would you think it was weird to strike up a conversation with someone that you didn't know?
No, not at all.
And would you do it here?
Absolutely not.
You guys don't like it. I learned that the first time I ever got in the lift in my building. I stepped on the lift, there were other people there, so I said hello, and they said nothing. And then I got to my floor, so I stepped off the lift, and this other man also stepped off the lift. So I said, "Oh, same floor." And then he said, and he just kept walking. And then I got to my front door, and he got to his, and he was literally my next door neighbor. But he still didn't acknowledge me. I was so freaked out by the whole exchange. I felt like Bruce Willis at the end of The Sixth Sense. I was like, have I been dead this whole time? What? But now I've lived here for 8 years and I've entirely assimilated because now I don't want anyone to talk to me ever at any time. And I realized that I had become a Londoner when I was sitting on the tube one day and this man got on the tube, just bare feet, but a formal top hat. And he sat down right next to me. And then this American woman sitting across from us just went, "Oh, that's a fun hat." And somehow she seemed like the crazy one to me. That man was literally eating a piece of paper like it was a snack, and I just looked at him like, this bitch is crazy. It was hard for me deciding to move this far away from my parents after everything we've been through. And it is still tough now, but lots of really good things have happened since I moved over here. Probably the best thing of all is that I met my boyfriend, and I know I give him a hard time in the show, but he really is the love of my life, that little creep. I remember on one of our first dates, he asked me what I thought the biggest cultural difference was between the US and the UK. Like, is it the food or the sense of humor? And I said, hands down, it is circumcision. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but in the States, all the boys are circumcised. Did you guys know that? Sasha?
Oh, yeah.
We've done the research. So when I moved over here, I was really shocked because I had never even seen organic produce before. And I did not know to expect it because it's not the kind of thing they give you a heads up about on TripAdvisor. So when I messed around with an English guy for the first time, I was just like, oh, okay. They grow differently here. Because American men, they all get the snip, you know? They're just hanging out in your face. But British men, you're much more reserved, you know? Even your penises like to keep to themselves. In case you're wondering, Andrew, even though he's not American, he is circumcised. I insisted. He is Irish, but like I said, his name is Andrew, which is very boring because I love Irish names. My first ever flatmate was an Irish girl whose name was Kiva. And if you don't know how that name is spelled, it's C-A-O-I-M-H-E. And when she told me that, I was like, that's not a name. That's a Wi-Fi password. But Andrew is great because after the accident, I dated a string of just absolutely terrible men. I mean, I once dated a guy who joked that my back hair gave him beard envy. I know. It was cool, though. I just told him I was actually completely hairless before we met, but then we slept together. My body identified that I was the alpha and responded. Thank you. He was a terrible person. He was actually an actor, but the best thing he's ever been in was me. Thank you. Andrew came back with me on this trip, actually, to meet my mom and dad, and I was really nervous because they're very different people, but they got on, except it was trying for two reasons. Number one, my dad can't go 2 seconds without talking to or about Andrew in a very offensive Irish accent. And number two, we're not married, so we weren't allowed to sleep in the same bedroom together, which, it's fine. It's my dad's house, it's his rules. The problem was my brothers and their wives were also staying at my dad's house for the retirement party, so there was no room for Andrew to sleep in at all. And I had this argument with my mom. I said, you're being ridiculous. We live together. Just let him stay with me. And my mom said, I know what we'll do. Andrew, honey, you can just sleep downstairs in the walk-in closet. And I said, are you insane? And my dad said, better conditions than the Irish are used to. Two big things happened while I was home on this trip. The first one was that I found that book of Aesop's fables that my dad used to use to read me to sleep, and I read it again. And the last story in it is the story of the North Wind and the Sun, which says the North Wind and the Sun are having an argument about which one of them's the strongest. So they make a bet. They see a traveler walking down the road, and they say, whoever can get the traveler's coat off, that proves they're the strongest. So the wind goes first, and the wind just blows and blows as hard as he can. But the harder he blows, the tighter the traveler clings to his coat. So the sun goes next, and the sun just does the only thing it can. It just shines brightly, warming everything up around the traveler. And eventually, the traveler just takes his coat off himself. The other thing that happened was that Josh proposed to his boyfriend, Sean, who said yes, and they asked me to officiate the wedding. And I told my dad, and I said, have your views on gay marriage changed? And my dad said they had. He said, when I was your age, I didn't know anyone who was gay. I thought gay people had something wrong with them, but from knowing people in your life, like Josh, I don't feel that way anymore. And I realized that there was some truth in that fable that my dad used to use to read me to sleep, because no matter how much I screamed and shouted and tried to force my dad to change his beliefs, in the end, the thing that changed his mind was just Josh being his brilliant self. And I'm not saying that I don't think you should stand up for what you believe in, because I absolutely think that. I think sometimes you have to shout. But also, sometimes you can just do what my mom does. Wait till they have a nap and then just paint the fucking wall anyway. For my dad's retirement party, my mom said, every year at your father's school, there's a tradition when someone retires that a representative from the family gives a speech. Now, normally I would do it, but I think this year, Janine, you should do it. So I sat there at my dad's retirement party in a shrunken dress I'd picked up from the dry cleaner earlier that day. And I was nervously rubbing this stain out, and Andrew was with me, and he said, I actually think the stain looks kind of cool. And I said, you would, it's blood. The guy came to the podium. I thought he was gonna announce me, but instead he said, all right, that's the end of the speeches. Everybody eat. And there was a mad rush for the food. And my mom ran up on the stage and she whispered in his ear, and he said, oh, hold on, wait a second, everybody. Okay, the daughter would like to make a speech. And I realized my mom lied, there was no tradition. And I stood there on stage in a bloodstained dress that was 2 sizes too small. And I got to thank my parents for the first time properly. I said, most parents only teach their kids to walk once in their lifetime. My parents did it twice. There was a time when I couldn't even get up out of my wheelchair, and my parents encouraged me to keep trying. My dad said, all we want you to do is stand up. And I think career-wise, I took that too literally. I thanked my parents. I left the stage pulling down my skirt so as to not flash my Lulu at anyone. And when I got back to my table, I overheard the woman behind me just lean over to her husband and go, Joe's slutty daughter is good at talking. The next day, I was packing the boxes from my room into my dad's car to go to the airport, and I told my dad about the show. I said, Dad, I'm writing a show about you and about your beliefs, but I don't want to paint you as a villain. I want to paint you as a 3-dimensional character, somebody who is a good person but has flaws like everybody else. And my dad said, just make me an asshole. It'll make the show funnier. And that's the kind of guy that my dad is. He's generous to a fault. He said, you know, I don't feel like I only have 3 kids anymore because Tang, he's like a son to me. And that boy in India is like a son to me. I said, it's Pakistan, Dad. He lives in Pakistan. Josh came by with his fiancée, Sean, to meet my dad for the first time and to see me off to the airport. And my dad said, Josh, I just want to say congratulations. I'm very happy you found somebody as wonderful as Sean to spend the rest of your life with. And if you boys come this way, I believe I have some magazines you may be interested in. This one. My dad was right about one final thing, because after I moved to the UK, I did get to live my dream. I was cast in a film. I was playing opposite Keira Knightley. I was super excited because it was a biopic, so I was playing a real person. I'm not sure if anyone here knows much about French history around the turn of the century, but I was playing girl number 2. You're familiar with her work? Yes. I had a super tiny part. I had one line, and I was meant to seduce her with it. So I was meant to be like, I don't remember meeting you before. You know, just like so sexy that she'd be so turned on that she'd just float away in a river that she created. But I was so nervous that instead of being sexy, I was creepy as fuck. And I just went, I don't remember meeting you before. And I thought, okay, Janine, you're stuck in a loop here, because no matter how many times I did it, it just kept coming out the same. I was like, I don't remember meeting you before. And I thought, all right, you have to do something to break the cycle. So I thought, well, I'm a comedian. I'll make a joke of it. So I looked at her and I was like, I am so sorry, this isn't coming out right. It's less like I want to seduce you and more like I want to murder you and then fuck your dead body. I said that to her. I thought it'd be hilarious. You guys, she did not find it hilarious. In fact, she looked terrified of me. Looking back on it now, it was a real Me Too moment for Keira. Anyway, I finished the scene and I left the set avoiding eye contact with everyone. And when I got home, I was absolutely mortified. But eventually I got over it because I thought, well, I'll never, ever see her again. And even if I did, she'd never remember who I was. But 2 weeks later, they had a wrap party for the film. And when I got there, I saw her and she saw me. And she was like, Janine, right? And I just went, it's actually Sophie. Thank you so much, guys. You've been